Okay. And here we are.
Hi everybody, I'm Jeff, I'm the Moderate, and this is Anthony.
Anthony the Anarchist.
So together we're the Anarchist and The Moderate, and we like people to learn about anarchism. And I'm just kind of a learner myself, but Anthony's an authority, or not an authority, but he knows a lot about it. So
somewhat knowledgeable, possibly.
So anyways, I'll give the floor to Anthony, and he'll talk about anarchism, because it's a lot of people,
Okay.
a lot of people, very, like, say Chomsky thinks it's the the way of the future for.
Well, for sure, yeah. And Chomsky was part of really instrumental in bringing me to anarchism, making me realize that that was really where I was already lying. I guess I would just say, why is it important to take a look at anarchism right now? Why is anarchism relevant to this moment that we're in? I would say because clearly most of us can see, capitalism is not serving the needs of regular working class people. That's been pretty obvious to most people that took a hard look for a long time. So that leaves you with, so what would we like if we don't want a system where the rich rule us? Well, socialism, really, the alternative, has two versions. There's socialism from above and socialism from below. Socialism from above can be represented by the Soviet Union, Communist China, Communist Cuba, whatever, where certain leaders are seen as knowing the path and leading people to this better society. Where socialism from below wants authority to come up from the people, from the communities, from the workers. Depending on which tendency you have, there's more of a placement on community assemblies and or worker assemblies.
Direct democracy.
It's direct democracy. The socialism from below really amounts to what could be called direct democracy or participatory democracy, where you aren't voting for which representative of Wall Street to take your interests to a higher level. You aren't voting for some guy in a suit in Ottawa or Toronto to somehow carry forward the interests of the poor and working class in our communities down here. This would be people running their own communities. This would be people running their own workplace. Imagine democracy where you would have a say in your own workplace, where authority would flow upward, not downward, where the workers would get together and decide how things are run, what we're making, what we're doing,
It's like a co-op, or
co-ops, exactly, only for real and everywhere. The anarchist vision would be that all industries would be run this way. That a union, the idea of a union would transform. It wouldn't be a group of people negotiating with a boss. It would be a group of people running what they're doing in conjunction with the community they're in conjunction with other people who are doing the same sort of work around them. So if you're a nurse or working in the medical field, you would be part of a group of people in the immediate surrounding, in whatever workplace you're in, the hospital, the care facility, the whatever circumstance you're working in, and they would be part of a broader network of people working in London the people from the various hospitals and places, and they would form a London medical community run by an assembly of the workers in the area. And you would have a direct input. You may not always get your way, but you would have a direct input and have actual say, not depending on a guy in a suit and tie, and hopefully he carries your thought forward out of the thousands being put forward that he's supposed to somehow represent in whatever parliament that they're in.
How's anarchism different from like the current system that we have?
Well, it would be radically different. I mean, to begin with, the running motto, the golden rule, would be for each according to their need, and from each according to ability. So the running rule of society would be looking to get the most they can out of you, the most fulfillment of your abilities out of you for society's benefit. But not in a coercive Stalinist model where it's at the end of a rifle, or the capitalist model where it's starve and have nowhere to live or do this particular work. It would be, again, in conjunction with other people that you would be working with and people in your community. So people would get more fulfillment in that way, and it would differ. I mean, imagine a group of workers who are given actual say in this regard I'm describing. Imagine when they're given the choice of how their business is going to operate, that they're producing whatever gadget, say, they're not going to likely, I imagine, vote to send their work to some other country to make more profit because the workers are making too much money, supposedly. That's all. That would become a thing of the past. People would be working and benefiting their community and their fellow workers as a primary drive. They wouldn't vote to poison the river. They wouldn't vote to cut down all the trees. They wouldn't vote to, endlessly explore and kill the habitat with no plan to get us off fossil fuels. They wouldn't likely want to go start a civilization on Mars rather than fix what we have here while we can. Because regular working people are much more grounded in the reality that they're in than these bourgeois capitalists who have enough wealth to afford space programs and shoot themselves up into the stars.
Does anybody have any questions about anarchism for Anthony? And if you could like and share the live, I'd appreciate it. We're just talking about anarchism as an alternative to the pseudo-democracy we have now. Like we've seen in the States that there is no democracy really. The Democrats rigged their primaries, and they didn't even, Kamala, they just kind of picked her as to be the person without much input from the voters. And we see that it's a rigged system. Even in Canada here, there's only Coke or Pepsi, and you have no alternative to Coke or Pepsi, and both of them are going to make us sick and sell us out.
Well,
so
we have Orange Crush.
Yeah, we have Orange Crush. But anarchism is kind of like people over profit, as Kevin was just pointing to.
Yeah.
And the capitalism system is unsustainable. We're hurtling towards destruction. Most people don't realize that the phytoplankton in the ocean provide 2/3 of the world's oxygen, and when the ocean heats up as it's doing and gets more acidic, those creatures die, and they're the base of the food chain. So not only is the food chain going to collapse in the ocean and probably over much of the earth, but all the oxygen they produce isn't going to be there. And we have these big dead zones and things because of the jet stream going farther south and north, the decrease in the temperature gradient, the massive amounts of chemicals used, fertilizers going into the ocean and causing algal blooms. But we're just digressing. I'll let Anthony talk more about anarchism.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so again, I guess going back to why is it relevant? I mean, so you have this choice. If you really want, like, maybe you think it's possible to reform things and slowly change society for the better. Maybe you genuinely believe that. Then you're left with the choice of which group of people, which party, which candidates do you think are actually gonna steer us in a better direction, a better society for all working class people, for someone that's gonna end the endless wars around the world, someone that's gonna close military bases, someone that's going to start spending on people and preparing for environmental change and education and healthcare. I mean, it's just so obvious that there's immediate things that could be done without a whole lot of thought. But the ruling class doesn't want them, especially in America. They're even more savage system there than here. I think we're all glad to be stuck in Canada rather than the States.
Maybe talk about Rajab in Syria, how the good thing they had going, or the height of the anarchist movement during the 1936.
Well, I could. Just those are things I really think deserve a more full discussion. We only have a short time, really. But I guess the point would be, like, people will say, well, what can you point to in what have anarchists accomplished? What in history would you look to say that would be something to look to about anarchism? Well, anarchists have taken part in a number of uprisings and revolutions, but there's a couple that are probably worth looking at even more. Recently, there was an area in Syria that's part of the Kurdistan, historical Kurdistan, and they had a transformation of their revolutionary resistance group to a model that was more closely aligned with anarchism. Apparently they were influenced by some of the works of Murray Bookchin and decided to change how they were operating some things, and they did this right around a time before the civil war in Syria broke out, and they were able to create this area called Rojava that they lived by these really radical principles, and they had assemblies, and they were granting women all these equal rights on everything. They had women in the militias. They had militias that were all women fighting ISIS. Apparently some of the best fighting against ISIS was these militias. So, and they've carried that on for quite a while. They're in a tough predicament, but that would be worth talking about probably at greater length someday. And the big one that most anarchists point to as sort of the high watermark of influence, where one of the few times that we've held actual territory as anarchists was the Spanish Civil War, or as many of us think of it as the Spanish Revolution, where the governments collapsed on the Republican side, and there was a military coup that was backed by the Nazis in fascist Italy, and the anarchist militias went out and fought them in a civil war, and also similarly were able to sort of put these anarchist principles into play in a big chunk of Spain called Catalonia, and they were able to put a different world in place, one that's been described by different people that visited it as something worth fighting for. I think George Orwell called it, where working class people were really in charge, and collectively. There was no great leader, there was no hierarchy that's apparent in any other situation like this. It was all done in a horizontal manner where everyone had a say, a vote in things that affected them directly. Even the militias, you would vote for your commanding officer. And these things were carried on for quite some time until they were brutally suppressed by both the Republican and the nationalist side, and
the fascists?
Yeah. So Spain went into a dictatorship under Franco for decades, but there's many lessons that are apparent when looking at the Spanish Civil War. So that's one that should be looked at by anyone curious about anarchism these days, for sure. And there's others.
Where do Antifa and anarchism kind of intersect? Are they philosophies or ways of thought worldviews that are aligned? Antifa and anarchism.
Well, I mean, Antifa is really just anti-fascist, right? And so when fascism developed in the 1920s, in the aftermath of the First World War, first in Italy with Mussolini, and then later in Germany and other places, there was a resistance to it that developed, especially once some of these countries started turning fascist. There was in other countries, workers were like, we don't really want to go that route. So there was a street resistance that took place, and that developed into this anti-fascist movement that would confront the fascists, that would defend various things in the community. And over time, that's kind of changed the look and feel of what they're actually doing. But that's really the roots of it and the heart and soul of it up to today, when there's these sort of fascist groups that come out to confront various minorities or vulnerable groups. And so anarchists tend to be not alone, but tend to be drawn to defending these groups.
Okay, we're probably going to wrap it up pretty soon, Anthony,
Yeah.
But anything else you wanted to talk about, anything interesting about anarchism that people should maybe learn more about, or do you recommend an author they can read to learn more about?
Well, I mean, there's tons of people to read. The deeper I dig into anarchism, the more there is to dig into. My book pile grows and grows faster than I can read, because the more I read, the more you're exposed to, the more you see that I hear about more books and more things I want to look into, and so it's endless. The people that influence me the most, I would say, are Noam Chomsky, Emma Goldman, maybe my favorite person in all of history, her sometime partner, Alexander Berkman. I like Enrico Malatesta, Nestor Machno. I read Wayne Price is a more contemporary writer, but there's lots of them. And we're going to dig into some of these things in upcoming episodes. We're going to dig into other issues, dig into anarchism more, maybe in a more clear way. This was sort of just a brief chance to get out there and let people know that there's going to be a channel and that we're going to have some material coming up. So
thanks for listening. Appreciate your interest. Thanks for liking and sharing. I guess we'll catch up with you before too long, but look in the next week for us to start putting up some promo clips and diving deep into some interesting topics that anarchism in today's political system, social movements, and how we can all benefit by embracing the anarchist model and direct democracy, participatory democracy in our communities, and having like meeting as a community and community assemblies or general assemblies in communities of people where consensus and shared decision making, shared governance. Okay, cheers. Thanks for joining.